Hello, this is Steven out, and yes, we are back with another Green Hornet 66 episode review. Today, we'll be reviewing the episode, The Hunters and the Hunted. So without any further ado, let's hop straight into this review. We begin this episode with the Green Hornet and Kato driving off in the Black Beauty to have a special meeting with a notorious gangster by the name of Hurt. And judging by the sounds of the dialogue, we have a feeling that these guys may have had run-ins with this particular mobster before. They make their way to the rendezvous point and find that for a moment thinking Herc's not there until he makes himself known. He has turned up alone and is there to have a friendly meeting with the Green Hornet, though the Green Hornet is skeptical about anything being friendly. However, he tells him that forget about it and listen up. There's these people around, people who are trying to bump off all the biggest racketeers and basically notorious criminals in the city, and both he and the Green Hornet are on this list. When the Green Hornet presses of how he knows about the list, he says he has it bought and paid for. He proposes an idea that the Green Hornet and him team up to essentially get rid of him. But the Green Hornet presses on how does he know about the list. Eventually, it just leads into an argument where the Green Hornet decides to leave Herc. Even though Herc says that the Green Hornet needs him, he says he's never needed him and he never will. And just as he walks off, Herc pleads for the Green Hornet to stay, only for some kind of blow dart to essentially fire into Herc's back, and he collapses on the ground. Green Hornet and Kato go to look at his body, but realize that he's already dead. But just as that's happening, they hear a car drive off, and both Kato and the Green Hornet pop in the Black Beauty and chase this car. It's an interesting car chase, and it eventually leads into the car that they're chasing end up getting crashed, and presumably the driver being killed. Realizing there's no point to stay here as there's nothing they can do, they hop in the car and drive off. We do the usual opening credits and we get back to the Daily Sentinel, where Mike Axford comes in and explains that what's going on. And we get an exposition dump basically saying all the big notorious racketeers and essentially big mobsters in the city are getting bumped off, with Herc being the recent name on the list. However, of the list of gangsters. And Britt thinks, well, maybe someone's trying to clear away competition, but Mike's not so sure. He points out that the gangsters are dying in not traditional drive-bys or traditional assassinations, but are being killed with either spears, bow and arrow, silk handkerchiefs, and now a poison dart. These gangsters aren't dying the way they're supposed to, though it is proven effective, but the question remains, who's doing it? Eventually, Mike Axford leaves when Britt Reed says he has a call, with Frank Scanlon. And I like how, as Mike leaves, he says, what happened to the good old days, and essentially imitates a traditional gangster Tommy gun. I think that's maybe a little reference to the Green Hornet going up against those traditional gangsters of that decade, but hey, that's just me maybe being a bit too insightful. We get a call from Frank Scanlon, and he reveals that the driver of the person that the Green Hornet and Kato were chasing was actually an accountant named A.J. Clark, who was essentially an accountant with no mob ties. Britt Reed also seems to know him, and he was surprised that it was him, and he said he was a nice little guy. Frank Scanlon then points out it could have been possible he was chasing the wrong man, but Britt says no and hangs up. But realizing now that the trail's about to go cold, the only possible thing he can do now is find out where the list that Herc supposedly had and who he got it from. As a result, he then heads to Herc's number 2, Krogan, who is now heading up Herc's operation of running the numbers racket. The Green Hornet and Kato make their entrance and interrogate the new racketeering boss, and he says that he got the that Herc got the information possibly from a former big-time player, now small-timer, Jackie Tabor, known as the Tout. Now these days he's more of a stool pigeon, and he said when this meeting was about, when he asked for a meeting, he thought naturally Herc would throw him out, but instead decides to go to the meet anyway, realizing that Jackie Tabor is the logical choice, to see where this trail goes. They go to his place, only they're too late to find him dead. However, they do know that he was killed very recently, and decide to look throughout the place, for any possible lead. The only thing they got was a whole bunch, essentially, these old-fashioned cigarette matches with the brand to a local club that essentially comprised of old game hunters. We then cut to a scene where Crane and three other hunters having a meeting. The other three are chastising Crane for killing Jockey Tabor, saying he was nothing more than a waiter. However, he sets them straight, saying that how they're involved in this dangerous game as he is, and that there used to be 5 of them, now there's only 4. It turns out E.J. Clark was a member of this conspiracy to essentially wipe out all the big racketeers, and Jockey Tabor was killed because he was found the information, trying to blackmail him, and he also figures that he might have been responsible for Clark's death. So not only is he clearing up traces, but avenging their late friend. And it's clear that these guys are all in cahoots to essentially wipe out the city's big racketeers, and essentially, in their mind, freeing their city from their grasp. And they propose a toast for the next person on their list, the Green Hornet. So that's how Now, we then cut to Britt Reed now going to the Millionaires Club, probably the next day, to set up, essentially to join and be a member. He meets the president, who just so happens to be Crane, and he voices his concern about how the recent crime wave with certain mobsters getting killed in fashion similar to this. It's, traditional hunters. Kraken says he knows everyone here, but he doesn't think they could kill a human being. However, he's willing to agree to help in his cooperation in both, finding some info to probably help out with his investigation and also to get him a membership. Because it seems that Britt Reed is genuinely wanting to join this club, and also... Now, just as Britt leaves, Crane is essentially a little bit paranoid that he might stumble onto something and maybe start to put the pieces together. So he ends up calling up Krogan, who, as we know, is now taking over Herc's operations as the new numbers boss. And essentially, the two made a deal where he would bunk off Herc, and Krogan would take over the numbers operation and essentially essentially take orders from him. Crane then tasks him to rob out Britt Reed. However, he says he's not set for that kind of a rob out, as something like that would blow the whole town wide open. But he says, no matter what, get set up and take him out now. But later that night, 2 of Crocker's men end up going to Britt Reed's house and they try to assassinate him. But he is saved at the last minute by Kato. However, they happen to recognize the 2 men and realize it was Crocker's men, and then head to his office to once again interrogate him. The Green Hornet reveals to him that they managed to get to Jockey Tabor just before he died, and essentially say that he's on the list of people to get killed. The next day, Crocker ends up calling up Crane, and just as Crane is worrying, is Britt Reed dead, he says no, but he got another visit from the Green Hornet saying he's on his list. Krogan says no, as he personally took care of him himself and no way he could have told anyone anything. The Green Hornet simply tried to play him against each other, and essentially end up winning. Krogan agrees that this sounds like a plausible theory, and then Crane comes up with a plan to get rid of the Green Hornet. Later that day, Krogan ends up leaving the building, going in his car and going to a essentially remote location away from police. We find out that Crane and the rest of the conspirators, the rest of the hunters, are there, all ready to kill the Green Hornet. They see that both Krogan and the Green Hornet have entered the compound. They agree to kill him using only traditional hunting methods, as guns would alert anyone nearby and possibly contact police, plus these would be silent and efficient. Realizing that, they get ready. The Green Hornet, however, is no amateur. As soon as he enters, he realizes he's been spotted, and he and Kato then split up and cover more ground. However, they do end up getting into a few special hidden traps along the way. Throughout, they're trying to avoid traps and essentially take down the rest of the conspirators. They take down 3 of the hunters, but Kato is then cornered by both Crane and Crocker. The Green Hornet comes at the last minute to take down Crane, and Kato knocks out Crocker. Crane tries to make a run for it, whilst also at the same time trying to plead with the Green Hornet that they could work together. However, he knows that there won't be no deal, as there will be just more murders including his, and said that the town is not big enough for the both of them. As he tries to run, he gets caught in his own special trap that he had prepared for the Green Hornet. However, he's not dead, but he is asking for the Green Hornet to calm him down. The Green Hornet Kato leaves, saying they're about to call Frank Scanlon to come and round everyone up. We end the episode with Crane and the rest of the conspirators all essentially arrested and about to go to prison, with Crocker essentially giving testimony to the whole thing. However, and Mike Axford says with essentially all the big racketeers either dead or now arrested, there's not going to be one left game for the Green Hornet to play. And Britt Reed says, I hope you're right, and we end the episode there. Really, I think nothing much really going on with most of the supporting, really, other than the Green Hornet, of course, being more of a role. And when we just thought Kato was getting more of a role, he kind of still goes back into the background, but we still get a pretty good, decent fight scenes with him, so I guess really it is fine with that. Frank Scanlon and Mike Axford are really just exposition. Hell, Frank Scanlon doesn't really appear that all much in this episode, and is, I think, only given just one brief scene. Same with Case. I like the exposition Mike gives at the early bit of the episode, and I just always loved it. Now let's talk about the villains. I actually like some of the villains in this episode. Crane, being essentially a millionaire with a hunting obsession, is honestly kind of reminds me of Kraven the Hunter from the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery. Now, what I like about him, heavenly, is his motivations are vague, but what he essentially is trying to do is wipe out all the city's big criminal element, both racketeers and notorious criminals, and essentially trying to clean up the city, albeit very extreme. But it's also kind of a hint that he's also trying to take over the city by, trying to run all of its criminal operations. Even having Krogan as his sort of head stooge to run, the mob. Crane and Krogan is a really fun and interesting gangster. Now, the actors who play these guys, Charles Bateman as Quentin Crane and Robert Strass as Bart Crocker, respectively, for me are just really fun and really Crocker's really the more, what you would say, kind of, I guess, a little bit of comic relief, but really just like a strong, imposing henchman. I would doubt if it got a second season that this particular gangster would come back, but Crane would be. You can make it that he could come back to finish his mission of getting rid of the city's big criminal underbelly, but also running it in his own image, and also with his humiliation with the Green Hornet, wants to come back to even the score. Again, a really fun and interesting villain. Again, I think there's a little bit of an interesting rogues gallery starting to form with Lo Sing in the previous one, and even the Man in Black in the second episode, and really Kurt Connors, even though they kind of killed him off. There are some really possibilities of really interesting villains for this Green Hornet's Rogues Gallery get introduced in these episodes. The Hunters and the Hunted is honestly a really fun episode. I like the concept here of these eccentric millionaire hunters who essentially are going around killing the gangsters, albeit with a very different method, with very much in vague of what are they trying to accomplish, getting rid of the city's underbelly or mussing out the competition to take over. I like it has a bit of a vagueness, and you could take it forever you want, or people could just interpret that as just messy writing. Honestly, this is a really fun episode, and I really like it. It's an interesting they introduced an interesting concept here. And even though I like it, it's a fun episode. I think it also could have been a two-parter as well. A concept like this should have been it should have been a two-part story, and not just a one. But it's still a fun episode nonetheless. There we have it. That was The Hunters and the Hunted. Join us next time in another Green Hornet episode review. And until then, this has been the Steven Hour, and so long for now.